But without much further ado, we're going to Zurich to meet Nicholas Colloff, who is the Executive Director of the Argidius Foundation, and we will have a conversation on the topic of supporting small businesses to build back better. We agreed to be on first-name basis. Nicholas, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. Nicholas, the same question for you. How has COVID-19 impacted the work of you and your organization?
So Argidius is a private family foundation. We work with about 50 to 60 business support organizations in Africa and Latin America primarily, of which PUM is one and a long-standing partner of ours, to provide basically two sorts of support. One is knowledge and technical skills to improve the resilience and growth of your business, and then access to finance, usually associated also with non-technical support. How has COVID impacted? Well, as we've heard, it's had significant negative impact. Probably on about 80% of businesses that we've worked with have either stalled in their growth or shrunk. Interestingly, about a fifth, of course, have grown, and some have grown very substantially and find themselves actually addressing the challenges of rapid growth because of the sector that they're in. And of course, that's incredibly positive. And the business support organizations themselves have had to adapt to the digital world very quickly. Some were already using platforms and digital means for delivering their assistance, and others were basically working face-to-face. And so they had to adapt very quickly to how do we continue to support our entrepreneurs in this time of crisis as they move forward.
Stephen Collette, earlier in this conference, talked about how COVID has added to poverty and inequality. And at the same time, we see that one of the ways out of the COVID-19 crisis, or a way to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, is, I would almost say, an inclusive, resilient, sustainable digital approach. And especially when it comes to digital, it feels that this could also increase the inequality because some people have more finances and access to digital means than others. How do you look at this paradox?
Yes, it's a real paradox. We produced a report recently on helping business support organizations go digital. But one of the things we counseled is that there will be different pathways for different kinds of support, depending precisely on who is your market. So, for example, you take a country like Guatemala, most people in Guatemala have a smartphone. The problem is not that they have a smartphone, but that actual access to loading and unloading data is incredibly expensive. So even when you have very significant penetration of the hardware, the use of the software and the financing of that is very hard. So as we go forward, if we're thinking about how to adapt our offering to support businesses in a digital age, it will be very much not one solution fits all. Some will go down the pathway of greater digitalization. Others will have to think about, actually, no, that's inappropriate because face-to-face engagements still remain very important. One of the things we've heard about already is the importance of entrepreneurs being able to network with each other. And yes, there's a certain amount of networking you can do digitally and online, as we all know, but also there's just that serendipity of being in the same room and discovering, yeah, you have the same challenge. Well, how are you going to face that challenge? Somebody has learned how to export already their product and they want to help another entrepreneur do likewise. And those sorts of serendipitous connections, which are very important for helping businesses grow, are something that also will have to somehow continue when we can get back face-to-face around the water cooler.
Yeah, I will make the viewers from the Arab world very happy to quote my favorite proverb, ربما صدفة خيرا من ألف مئات. Coincidence is better than 1,000 appointments. And I think this is exactly what you mean. Sometimes coincidence can help us forward, but sometimes we need to make an appointment as well. We actually have a poll which I think could be very helpful also in our conversation. Let's look at the results of the poll, because I think when I look at the 5 elements we have in our Slido poll, I don't know whether you can see them as well, Nicholas. We can see that the most popular one is business environment reform. Could you, market access, oh well, no, that's actually not true. It's market access and development. So can you elaborate a little bit on how you work on this specific item on our poll?
Yes, so one of the things that we've helped our partners work on enterprises to think about how to improve their ability to, for example, work with supermarkets in Central America. So, so how do you go? How, as a small business, can you actually negotiate with Walmart in Central America to get your product in their shops? How can you think about, and at what point should you think about exporting? We know that market access to exporting, once you start doing that, will significantly improve both the productivity and the revenue of your business. There was a great study done with Egyptian carpet makers, and the half of the carpet makers that were given access, actually in this case the French market, improved both the quality of their product and the sales by 10% year on year for the 3 years of that access. And the people still producing for the local market didn't. So export can pull you into having to think about many things about how to improve the quality of your product, the structure of your business, its scale and size. So we've a number of our partners work in that space. There's a wonderful example of somebody who started as a micro client in Nicaragua producing her mother's biscuits. And then she was helped with technical assistance and access to finance in this case to go to a more industrial production of these biscuits, and they're now indeed in sale, not only in 3 supermarket chains in Central America, and she's gone from herself being the sole employer to having 30 to 40 employees, and beginning also to diversify her product range. So it's those kinds of journeys that we help people do by building an ecosystem of support which takes people from ideation right the way through to growth and scale, and tries to tackle some of the key challenges, market access, finance, knowledge and skills, in order to achieve their ambitions.
When I look at our results on the screen, what do you think is the most crucial type of small business support to build back better? It's also interesting, I think, to look at the other end of the scale, that people rate policy and advocacy a bit lower. And I'm wondering, how do you see this? Because, I mean, I'm a former diplomat, I'm into politics, I'm also very much into advocacy. And sometimes I feel that maybe there should be more sense of urgency when we're talking about SMEs in developing countries.
Yeah, and I think part of it obviously depends on the audience, and because advocacy and policy is something that individual entrepreneurs themselves can't particularly work on. It's dependent on business associations, aggregate organizations, chambers of commerce and others to work on. And of course, the results are not immediately apparent to an individual business, but they can be incredibly apparent to the system as a whole. So, for example, in Uganda, we've actually been working with the tax administration to improve not the regulation as such, which are relatively good, but the implementation of how that regulation then gets carried over into interactions with individual businesses. And you know, you may not notice that as an effect as an individual business immediately, but over time it may have a very significant role to play. Again, many business development services in places like the Netherlands and Switzerland are actually seen as public goods, and they're delivered with a degree of public subsidy. This isn't the case yet in many emerging economies. And so public policy then has a role in helping governments to see the value of business development services and to provide resources. So again, in Guatemala, the government of Guatemala has decided they should have a business development center in each region. They've decided they shouldn't develop them themselves. They should outsource that to NGOs and social organizations, but they are providing resources that have made those institutions more resilient and better able to provide services for the entrepreneur.
Well, you are right, indeed. We don't know who is our audience, but I think by your answer on a lower percentage of acknowledgement of the importance of policy and advocacy, you are a brilliant advocate for the importance of business support organizations, especially in times of crisis. And I can hear in all of the answers you gave and also of our previous speakers that the undercurrent is the importance of knowledge and sharing knowledge. And now, to get out of this crisis and to build back better or to build better forward, what kind of knowledge do you think is really of utmost importance to share with entrepreneurs in developing countries?
Well, I think, as we've all known, think about, is your supply chain secure? Many businesses have been significantly impacted where closing down has affected their supply chain. Think about diversification. Think about how do you finance your business through your own earnings. So often when you ask people about access to finance, people immediately start talking about investors and banks. And actually businesses primarily grow through husbanding their own cash flows and their own resources and utilizing those to grow. And so getting better and more thoughtful about that, because as we've seen, there's only, as soon as COVID broke out, liquidity collapsed, and so businesses are able to have richer cash flows, better managed, better thought through, have survived more effectively, and thinking about certainly also this sense of diversifying your marketplace and thinking about sales in terms of the value you bring, not simply the price, can also change the way in which your business begins to grow and develop.
Nicholas, I can see the team here taking notes. There are so many important elements in your answer. It's really, really helpful. We're almost ending our conversation, and I'm looking at the team whether there are questions in the chat that I could ask you, but I do have a question. I mean, you are a social entrepreneur, huh? And you're talking about serendipity, and I think I looked at also at your CV. I would almost say, if you had a magic wand, what would you think a social entrepreneur in small, medium enterprises, what kind of advice would you really want to give that you think would bring people back on track?
Well, two things really. So one is get yourself a good mentor. There's really good evidence that having somebody who's been through it before and has done it successfully can make a huge difference to enabling a person to just get a sense of space and direction. And again last year, it was really apparent that businesses who had somebody to just actually listen to them as they had to think about how to adjust and go forward. But also it's the same in when you're faced with the opportunities of growth and development. So it's not just about when a business is challenged, but when it's really facing really interesting opportunities. And so that would be the first point. And the second point would be the one thing that and it shouldn't sound terribly surprising, but the one thing that makes the most impact on your business's success is your focus on sales. And sales is not marketing. Sales is actually knowing your customer and selling to them, and selling driven by the value of what you have to offer, not simply the price at which it's being offered. And we looked at this extensively in a very extensive trial in Central America with thousands of businesses involved, and it was sales that really, really mattered.
Get yourself a good mentor. I definitely, I would almost add to this, dare to ask for help. One last question, which comes on our screen. Knowing PUM as partner organization, what would you recommend to PUM in terms of adapting its approach to these new circumstances and requirements? And a brief answer, because we have to go to the next item.
Refine how you do it digitally, because you can make it reach more people with less expense, though it's always face-to-face is great and advantageous. And keep focusing on what you're good at, really, in terms of, the technical assistance, connecting somebody who's really done this well professionally in the Dutch context, and being able to transfer that knowledge can make a huge difference, because PUM is one of our most cost-effective and most impactful partners. So keep doing what you're doing.
Well, it's almost as if I'm reading the evaluation the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs made on PUM, which was also definitely almost an A or maybe an A+. So thank you for this comments. And Nicholas, thank you very much for your time and for being with us. You gave us an enormous amount of information, knowledge, and this is what PUM and this meeting is all about: sharing knowledge, connecting to people, and empowering all of us to get out of this crisis and to build a better future together. Thank you, Nicholas, and hope to see you sometime live here in The Hague or anywhere else in the world. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.